Hello. We live in a world where we do a lot of talking about the priority and the importance of prioritizing human mental health and well-being. And then our actions show otherwise. I think when we take small children who do not fit into systems that have remained the same in a very long time, and then we make those children and their families responsible for their inability to fit into those systems, we do humanity a great disservice. I see a lot of media around the importance of children being in school, and I see a lot of families hit crisis point, suffer trauma, be completely disconnected from one another and their children. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that their children don't fit into the schooling system. Professionals and systems and many of the supports that are put in place to support our families whose children cannot go to school hold families responsible. And we know this when we think about the term school refusal. The term school refusal itself places a responsibility with somebody who's refusing. But we just completely dismiss the fact that there are very good reasons why a child is unable to attend school. And those reasons will be different for every single child. In the same way that there is not one correct diet for every human being, there is not one shoe size or clothing size for every human being. There is not one form of education or learning pathway that is correct for every human being. This is the beauty of humanity. This is what diversity is. And when we look at the way that our children's brains are changing, this is evolution. And when I'm seeing so much hysteria about children not attending school, I always ask the same question: why are we so afraid to evolve? Why are we so afraid to change? And as an autistic person, I know what's written about me in textbooks. And one of those things is that autistic people are resistant to change, or we're afraid of change. But then when you look outside of autistic people, and generally those children who are struggling to go to school or cannot get to school, they're often neurodivergent children, which means that they're autistic, ADHD, PDA, many, many different variations of brain types. And yet it's those systems around those children that tend to be quite rigid around their approach in how to support those children and those families. I wonder how society might look if families were supported to home educate, or if there were alternatives to children having to attend school every day and be told what to learn and how to learn it. If families felt free to explore alternatives without shame and judgment, and without being fed the narrative that there was something wrong with their children or their parenting. Because this is what we as families internalize. We come to understand through societal feedback, through social and cultural constructs, that when our children are unable to fit into a system or an environment, or to connect with a person or a place or a thing, then we have failed them as parents. And this could not be further from the truth. The saddest part inside of all of this is that before us are these incredibly brilliant minds, these incredibly innovative, progressive, luminous brains in our children. And what we're doing is we're taking them and attempting to fit them into a system that has not changed since the beginning of industrialization. And then we wonder why. Families need to know that there are professionals out here that will support you in whatever you choose, whatever you need. We will support you to explore your family narrative and your family story. I want to support families to know and to truly accept and embrace that if school is not right for your child, if you are getting up every single day and every single morning is a battle and your relationship with your children is suffering and you are completely disconnected and completely stressed out because you're unable to get your child to school, I want you to know it's okay for them not to be in that system. It is okay. And I also want you to know that I understand that as families and as parents, we often feel inadequate in terms of being able to offer a different way to our children or educate them at home. But there are so many different ways, so many different learning pathways for human beings. And there is so much fear around our children getting behind or failing in a standardized system. What we know and what is real is that human beings never stop learning. It's not like, we reach 21 and we stop growing. We don't get to any particular age and stop learning. And neurodivergent people, we have a propensity to be autodidactic, which means we are self-led in our learning, particularly those of us with a PDA expression of autism. I left school when I was 15. I was academically gifted and I fell through the cracks time and time again because I'm also ADHD and PDA, and I tried my absolute best to take in information and to retain it, and I wasn't able to. I tried my absolute best to stay focused, and I wasn't able to. And when I hit my teen years, I was absolutely burnt out from trying, because in amongst the trying, in my best trying, there was still disapproval, rejection, abandonment, punishment, judgment. There was still being reprimanded every day at school. And by the time I was 12, 13 in high school, most of my days were spent on conduct cards, which was a little fluorescent yellow card that I had to take to every single class with me and have a teacher write a comment on how I had behaved in class and sign it. So I was constantly under that pressure. And because I was unidentified autistic, ADHD, I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stay focused. I couldn't do my work in a classroom. I can't work around other people. That's why I have this little space out here outside of my home, not sharing an office with other people, because I cannot focus around other people. So school was not right for me. It was a great place to go and be social. I loved being with my friends, but I could not learn a damn thing because it wasn't the right environment for my brain, for my neurology, for my neurobiology. There are going to be plenty of neurodivergent children that thrive in a school system, and that's wonderful. But if your child doesn't, they are not a problem. You don't need to fix them or change them. You don't need to make them less autistic. And when we implement supports and tools, if it's something that we are only doing for the sake of our child being able to fit into a particular environment, then I think it's important to ask ourselves as parents, is this really worth it? Is it really worth my child being able to sit in a classroom and learn if at the end of every day they are so burnt out and so distressed and so dysregulated that they're absolutely wiped out to the point of, edging on that fine line that pushes us over into trauma? Because by the time we hit our teen years, sometimes that's where we end up. And that was me, because I couldn't sit still in class. And so on those conduct cards, I would have comments about, oh, she didn't get her work done, or she talked to someone beside her, or she was out of her seat. And so I was punished for who I was and elevated up to the next level of conduct, which was to be taken away from my friends and sat in an office to have my breaks and still to have my behaviour monitored and commented on, until I was finally placed into isolation. And by the time I was placed into isolation, I was not allowed to be around my social network at school. I had to have my breaks separately. I could see out the window. All my friends during breaks, and I was not allowed to be with them. I was in a room by myself with a supervising teacher watching me through a glass window. And by that time in my life, I did not want to be on earth anymore, because I was only ever punished. Nobody asked me why I was behaving the way I was, what was going on, and I probably wouldn't have been able to tell them because I really didn't know. I 100% burnt out, and I stopped going to school, and I stopped showering, and I stopped getting dressed, and my eating became disordered, and I was on a fast track to a really awful place in my life, and it did get a lot worse. And honestly, I don't feel a sense of blame or resentment. We didn't know then what we know now, but there is a wealth of information out here now inside of the adult neurodivergent community, and it's here for families to access. But I think before we can be open to accessing that lived experience, there's this need to be willing as parents to sit with the discomfort of challenging our own thoughts and beliefs about what our lives should look like and why. Who is this important for? Who is this serving? Why is this so important? Because so many families have children who cannot fit into that system at school, and they're encouraged to have this drive to make their children fit into that system. And I just want to say that is not the be-all and end-all. It's just not. Today I'm a 41-year-old woman, and I own my own company, and I have a couple of university degrees. That does not equal success. I'm happy and I'm thriving. I'm a mother, I'm married, I have a great social network. Most of it is online with my autistic kin, which is a great thing. And I also have friends offline, of course. But I did not stop learning. And through being afforded the flexibility and the space to pursue my passions and to be the learner that I organically and inherently am, I was able to return to education in my own time and in my own way. Did I go from the age of 15 to the age of 22 without any qualifications? Yes, I did. But it wasn't the end of the world. There are so many people in the world who are thriving and happy, who don't have university degrees, who don't have a high school diploma or VCE, and they're still valuable human beings. And I know, and I think we all know, that all it would take for this to change, for this ideal around the importance of institutionalized education to change, and this is the saddest part, I think, is if a few celebrities started talking about how it's okay for your children to learn in other ways. If we had enough celebrities getting up and talking about this and people hearing it, things would start to change. And I think that that's really indicative of how much we are taught to follow as human beings, how much we are taught to wait for permission from important people to do the things that feel right and good for us. And I want to give you permission now to tune into what is right and good for you and your family now, because this is the only life that we get. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I have sat, and I continue to sit, with hundreds of families, thousands of families who are traumatized, who are at crisis point, whose children have shut down completely because our families have not been supported to live out their true expression, who they are supposed to be, how they are supposed to show up in the world. We are not all the same. This is the beauty of being a human being. We are not all the same. Neurodiversity, biodiversity. A forest works beautifully in harmony. All the different plants, the flora and fauna, have a respect for one another, and they work beautifully like a symphony. Human beings, we have the capacity to do this as well. Please give yourself permission to explore what works for you and your children, because your child is not the problem and your parenting is not the problem either. It's that we forget our power. We forget that as individuals we have this power to connect with ourselves and our children and to know what is right and good for us. And you don't need to wait for permission to pursue that.